Business and personal core values. What are they? And why are they so important? Today, we are going to talk about business and life core values. Why are they so important? How do you use them? And what happens if you do not live by them, both inside your business and outside of your business? And we're going to hear from not just from me, but from some very brilliant minds in business, leadership, and even personal development. If this video at all resonates with you and you want to see how we at Summit Chasers can help create a strong foundation so your business can support scale and growth, so you and your team can live the lives that they dream of, that you dream of. After the video, hit the first link in the description to book a call with either me or one of our mentors, and we'll help you out. And absolutely zero obligation to do anything other than just that. But why should you even have values to begin with? Well, that is easy. It helps create a consistency that allows you to accumulate and be the person you want to be and the person you want to be represented as. And this is similar in business as well. They create consistency and act as a guide or even guardrails to stay within. So you can attract the people with similar values that want to accomplish similar things. You have a team that is working towards the same goals and are in line with each other on the foundations of which these goals are going to be achieved upon. Here's the fun part though. Everyone has values. Every business has values. Whether they are written on the wall, in your onboarding book, or on your screensaver in your phone, you have them. But if you are not intentional about them, intentional about communicating them, and almost being borderline obnoxiously consistent with them, they will not serve you. They will hurt you at that point. Let me give you this example. So I had a client a few years ago, and they wanted to expand into other markets. They wanted to grow out. So they hired a manager that could run and build a team in that separate market. And this market was remote from the main office and the main team. So they were kind of on their own. And at that time, they did not have a clear, established, communicated, and consistent set of core values. So they hired just based on the perceived skills and resume according past experience. Well, as the team grew, they noticed the team had a much higher than normal turnover rate. They were just doing things very different, down to how they ran meetings, how they communicated with each other, how they communicated with the rest of the team. It was almost like they were just they were a separate company at that point. Due to their underperformance and then lack of that cohesiveness with the rest of the company, they had to close down that entire market, which wasted hundreds of thousands of dollars, months of time, and poor reviews, which when you're new to a market and you don't have a bunch of good reviews to bury a few bad ones, those bad ones hurt big time, especially long term if you want to get back into that market. Now, with a set of core values, they would have had a much clearer basis on which they decided who and how they hired, how they would hold their key management team and people accountable, how they conducted themselves with clients and even between themselves. And that's exactly what they did. And they did so much more successfully in another market. Now, core values alone won't solve this, but the values are the foundation of which these principles and policies are created upon. They're a driving set of core tenets that really dictate how your people conduct themselves, who they conduct business with, and the decisions that they make. I had an absolute pleasure of interviewing a now hero of mine, Mr. Tom Dusenberry, former CEO of Hasbro Interactive, and now founder of Dusenberry Entertainment, who broke it down extremely well in his words with the importance of having core values. I will paste a link to the full length of all these interviews in the description below, but right now let's cut to a short section of that interview with Tom. How important and what is really the benefit for startups and small businesses to establish a set of these core values early on rather than waiting until they have a big team?
Yeah, I think it's critical. I think it's critical because it kind of sets the tone for everything that you are and what you aren't. And so for me, core values is something that I always look at, and I try to represent as closely as I possibly can. And when it comes down to it, when you're talking with other people, you're representing yourself, and a lot of times, representing yourself means is you have to have those core values that they say, okay, that I want to work with this person, or I want to rub shoulders with this person because they are like me and they have the values that I have. So to being able to articulate your core values and then living up to your core values, I believe is a differentiator that makes a successful entrepreneur.
Mm. And so what advice would you give them, or what would you challenge when they make this point of, I don't need my business principles or business core values to mimic my real life core values?
I think that your business core values and your life core values kind of go hand in hand. Now, they may be a little bit different because you're more community focused on your personal life and stuff like that. But I do think that fundamentally, you need to live up to something, right? And so live up to yourself. And that is to establish core values for you, for your company, and who you want to associate with. And if you do that and you live up to those core values, life will be good for you and you probably won't get yourself in a lot of trouble, and people will know specifically who you are and what you represent because of the core values that you carry.
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely. It allows for consistency. It's tough to wear two masks, right? If I'm going to be this person and live by these values outside of work, and then I have to go put on another mask and do that when I'm in and when I'm in my office, and it's really hard to keep that, especially if you want to grow and have a long lasting business. It's very, very difficult to keep those separate for such a long period of time. Um,
Yeah, and you find, like, for me, I'm a game guy, right? So I've been in the game industry pretty much all my career. And so for me, I must have done something right because I've been able to stay in the same industry all that time. And so a lot of it, goes back to the fact that, I respected people and I had core values as it relates to what I felt. And I would be in a meeting and somebody would be saying something that just wasn't consistent with what my core values were. I would speak up and I would say, respectfully say, this is what I feel. And so, it kind of carried me from a point of view of my entire career. And so, because of that, and because a lot of my core values, I get an opportunity to meet with Zach Carlin, and talk to other people about some of the things that I've done. And so, I do feel that it is very important for you to carry your life and your business career as it relates to core values that represent who you are in life.
so he didn't just highlight how important having core values are, but the importance of living by them, representing them. That's true authenticity, acting in a way consistent with the person you want to become and what you want your business to become. Some of you watching this may not be convinced about the importance of living the values of your business in your life outside of the business. I had a good friend of mine on the podcast, Mr. Ray Trevino, and we talk and we get pretty vulnerable of what can happen if you aren't consistent with your values, both inside and outside of the business. So let's cut to that tape. See it so often where business owners or leaders in general, they don't separate, or sorry, they do separate their values almost like you can't even, they're almost like two different people. So the values that they have in business are so different and almost polar opposite to their values in their life. So how important is it, do you think, for long-term success that those values may not be exactly the same, because that would be unfair ask, I think, but they at least are complementary to each other?
Man, that is that question makes me smile because it's another thing that I'm very, very adamant about. Only because the saying is the way you do one thing is the way you do everything, right? And so, and I was one of them. I've met CEOs and people that are great bosses, great leaders, treat their staff great, and then come home and treat their family like shit. And that's one thing that I never want to be or become or ever be again, right? If I'm gonna be kind to a stranger, I'm gonna be kind to my wife. If I'm gonna love a stranger, I'm gonna love my family. And so, while I understand the point, I think that it's extremely important to be who you are all the time, because not only is it mentally draining, physically draining, it's exhausting to change masks all the time. And then just like that old Japanese saying, we all wear three masks: the ones we show in public, the ones we show to our close friends, and the ones we show ourselves. And it shouldn't be that way. You should be able to just be yourself at all times. And again, a lot of the things that I say sound easy, but they are hard, and it takes work, and you have to be intentional about it every minute of the day. The one thing that I can't impose more on people is to just slow down and think about what your next action is, right? For guys like us, that are used to going a million miles an hour, sometimes it's tough. Like, I can't tell you, I had to hit my I was 44 when, actually 42 when all of that happened. And it took me that long to figure out, you know what, dude, you're going way too fast and you're going to burn yourself out. And I think, and again, to your point, I think it's very important to be who you are. Just be yourself.
Well, it's much easier to
And
be consistent that way, right? And
it's,
if you
you don't have,
if they're two, it's just so much, it's so much easier, and it's just so much more. It's just a much better long term play. And I think, like, I can speak for myself, but I want to ask you this question too. When I got into my, I was much younger, obviously, but when I got into my, making bad decisions, drugs, and that kind of stuff, it was a lot of it because I was escaping who I was pretending to be, because I thought that who I wasn't good enough, or it wasn't allowed. Maybe not good enough, but it wasn't allowed at the time, right? So that was your form of escapism. But I think the lesson there is either you slow down so that you can see things for what it is, right, and slow down and be intentional about your values, about the choices you're making, about who you are, or life's going to slow it down for you. And a lot of times it's
Mm-hmm.
not as pretty. A lot of times it's the rehab. A lot of times it's
Mm-hmm.
not having a place to live. A lot of times it's rock bottom. And to the point that was made in that clip, it's difficult having to wear all those masks. It gets tough and it gets lonely. And it can be very difficult to keep that up successfully, long term, and then really reach the goals and the heights that you want to reach. But how can you use these values in business? Well, I had another great guest on the podcast, Mr. Rob Cameronpour, and we discussed how having core values and principles allow you to have a much closer and tight knit team that allows for much more open, challenging discussions. It makes initiating strategy much more cohesive because everyone knows the bounds to stay within, and in the face of uncertainty, they have the values and principles to fall back on. But let's hear it from him. What is your advice to developing that type of, I don't want to say culture, but that type of mentality, especially among your leadership team, your main core leadership team, developing that the ability for them to really challenge each other honestly, and then be able to shake hands and be like, thank you afterward.
Yeah, so the great question, and I can pull up my expectations where I'll go through a set of expectations with my entire team at the beginning, either when I start with a company or I start with a new team, or even if it's the same team every year, you go through expectations multiple times. And one of the things you'll see there is I expect you guys to challenge me, but do it in a professional manner. So again, if you're leading by example, and if it's okay for them to do it with you, that means it's okay for them to do it with their colleagues. And I encourage that, but be professional about it, right?
Mm.
And it all comes down to creating that environment where, you create that positive environment where it's kind of like a family type where people trust each other. We don't throw each other under the bus. So those are all in my core values that I've created. We work as a team. We win as a team. We lose as a team. My hand ultimately goes up at the end of the day. If you guys mess up, it's okay. I'll put my hand up. I'm not going to throw you under the bus. We never throw each other under the bus when we have a meeting with like a client or we're sitting somewhere. We don't argue with each other in meetings. That's the culture you create at the beginning. So those are the expectations you set at the beginning when we're together, so that when we are with other people, they see that. Your clients can see that we're tight knit. Like, we support each other no matter what happens, folks. Like, we're in this together. And once you create that environment, and once you give, and it comes back to trust, building that trust and building those relationships, not just with the hierarchy, but within the group. So again, one of the things I say is, if you've got a conflict with one of your colleagues, don't come to me. You guys are grown ass adults. Go to a room, go to a coffee shop, go have lunch. I don't care. Go sit somewhere, iron it out. And if you really can't, come to a conclusion or a compromise, then you bring me as in like a mediator, right? And I'll be more than happy to do so. But I want you guys to do everything first. Like, this isn't kindergarten. Like, we're not in high school. Like, you don't go to your teacher, crying to your mommy, daddy. Like, solve it. You guys will need to do this in the real world. So the skills that you learn is applicable outside of your work environment as well. It'll help you with your relationships with your family. That's why I try to teach leadership, because leadership is applicable to all parts of your life. So that's something I really enjoy doing.
No, and that's great advice. And I our kind of one of our philosophies is the 4 Ps that makes us a successful, scalable company. It's the purpose. It has to be purpose driven. You have to have
Yes.
principles that you align with, and then you have to have the right people, and then you have to have process. So probably makes it
That's
scalable, right? But it's the purpose and principles that you just hit on, right? Like, if you're all aligned, on a purpose, like you have a mission that you collectively want to solve,
Yes.
and then you have the principles that you just, and then those principles, core values and that kind of thing,
Yes.
they're so important, because then it's the expectations are set right away. You challenge each other, you support each other. There's no, and I was at a conference, and if people that are listening that are regulars, they probably heard this a lot, but Tom Brady was speaking, and he said, we won however many Super Bowls, not on skill, we won it on values. We won it on team. And he said, if somebody came on, if we won the game and we had somebody come in that was complaining that I didn't throw them the ball, I would shake their hand and be like, man, you're a great player, but I can't wait to play against you. So it's so important to have that, and it's so foundational. All in all, the importance of having core values, what they can do for your business, and maybe more importantly, your life, and the lives of the people on your team, and even in your communities. It cannot be highlighted enough. So don't skip these. Do not skip establishing these core values, even if you're a very small business just starting out, because you think you're too small. If anything, it's more important, because you can increase the likelihood at that point that you'll attract the right people, not just onto your team, but into your network. If you're trying to raise capital, you have the right people investing in your business. And if you're a more established business and you feel like this may be something you're lacking, it's not too late. It may be more difficult later on in the maturation of the business, but that doesn't mean you just don't establish them. It just means it could take more time. It takes more consistency. But you can absolutely do it. I've done it before with both my businesses and my clients. Thank you so much for watching the video. If you're a business owner and you want to get out of the day-to-day, or maybe you want to scale your business to the moon, but you feel like you've just been running on this never-ending hamster wheel, working 80 to 100 hours a week to not get anywhere, we would love to chat and see if we would be a good fit to partner with you to build not just the business you want, but the life you've always dreamed of. Hit the first link in the description below and let's chat. Until next time, my fellow Summit Chasers, keep chasing your next summit.